A millionaire paid $5,000 to bring his housekeeper to a gala. Her move left everyone stunned. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, it's free, and it's the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories like this. Your support truly means the world to us. And let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now let's return to our main character. Her name is Clara Bennett, and until 3 days ago, the most expensive room she had ever stepped into was the penthouse she cleaned every Thursday morning. Barefoot, hair tied back, moving quietly so she wouldn't be noticed. Clara was 26, 5'4", and weighed barely 110 pounds. But she carried exhaustion like a second skin. She worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7, cleaning houses that looked like magazine covers, all while counting every dollar in her head because rent was due. Her mother's prescription wasn't cheap, and her old Honda's check engine light had been on for months. On the morning everything changed. She was polishing a marble countertop that cost more than her yearly income when the man she worked for, Julian Cross, walked in. Julian was a self-made millionaire, early 40s, sharp suit even at home, the kind of man people listened to before he finished speaking. Clara froze the way she always did when he appeared, lowering her eyes, already apologizing in her head for taking up space. He watched her for a moment, then said her name like it was part of a business meeting. Clara, I need to ask you something unusual. She turned, hands still damp from the cloth, heart pounding because unusual usually meant trouble. He didn't waste time. I have a charity gala this Saturday night. It's black tie. I need a date. Clara blinked, certain she had misheard him. He continued, calm, clinical. This is not personal. It's a favor. I'll pay you $5,000 for one evening. You attend with me, smile, say very little, and leave when I say we're done. That was it. No romance. No emotion. $5,000. Clara felt dizzy. $5,000 was more than 2 months of her pay. It was rent, groceries, gas, her mother's medication, breathing room. Her instinct screamed no. She was a housekeeper, not an accessory. She knew how people like her were seen in rooms like that. Julian added, almost as an afterthought, you don't need to impress anyone. Just don't embarrass me. The words stung more than she expected. Clara swallowed, her fingers tightening around the cloth. She thought about her bank account sitting at $93, about the voicemail from the pharmacy, about the ceiling stain in her apartment that kept spreading. She nodded once. Okay. Saturday came faster than she wanted. When the stylist Julian hired zipped her into a borrowed gown and stepped back, Clara barely recognized herself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, but she didn't. Her shoulders were stiff, her smile practiced. As the car pulled up to the gala venue, a historic hotel downtown with chandeliers and red-carpeted steps, her stomach twisted. Cameras flashed. People whispered. Inside, crystal glasses clinked and laughter floated through the air like perfume. Clara walked beside Julian, her arm light on his sleeve, every step measured. She felt eyes on her, curious, dismissive, sharp. Someone laughed a little too loudly behind her. Another woman looked her up and down and smiled without warmth. Clara reminded herself why she was there. $5,000. Just one night. She promised herself she would be invisible. She had no idea that before the evening was over, she would make a choice that would stop the entire room cold. Clara tried to breathe like she always did when panic crept in, slow and shallow, as if making herself smaller would make the room forget she existed. The gala unfolded around her in polished motions. Men in tailored tuxedos leaning close to exchange numbers. Women in gowns that shimmered like liquid light. All of it loud in its quiet confidence. She stayed half a step behind Julian, just as he had instructed, nodding when spoken to, smiling when required, careful not to draw attention. Every few minutes, someone would ask Julian a question that had nothing to do with her, and she would fade into the background again, exactly where she thought she belonged. But invisibility in a room like this was an illusion. She felt the looks linger longer than politeness allowed. She caught fragments of whispers drifting past her ear. Curiosity edged with judgment. Is she a model? A new girlfriend? Paid company? Clara kept her gaze forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, reminding herself that she was here for a reason, that this was temporary, that $5,000 was waiting at the end of the night like a finish line. She repeated it in her head the way she counted steps when mopping floors. $5,000. Julian introduced her to donors without saying much about who she was. Just her name, spoken plainly, as if it were enough. Some smiled politely, others barely acknowledged her. One woman, diamonds heavy at her throat, glanced at Clara's hands and smirked before turning away. Clara folded her fingers together, hiding the faint calluses left by years of scrubbing and lifting. She wondered if anyone here had ever cleaned their own bathroom, if any of them had felt the ache in their back at the end of a 12-hour day. Her thoughts drifted, uninvited, to her apartment, to the cracked mirror in the bathroom and the way she had barely recognized herself earlier when the stylist had finished. She felt like she was borrowing someone else's life, someone braver, someone who belonged under chandeliers instead of fluorescent kitchen lights. As the evening progressed, Julian grew more relaxed, laughing louder, shaking hands, his confidence feeding off the room. Clara watched him from the corner of her eye, noticing how easily he moved here compared to how distant he was at home. At work, he rarely spoke unless necessary, a man surrounded by silence and order. Here he was animated, alive. It struck her then that this gala was not just business for him. It was armor. At one point, Julian stepped away to speak with a group of investors, leaving Clara standing alone near a tall cocktail table. The moment stretched, uncomfortable and exposed. A server passed with a tray of champagne flutes, and Clara instinctively reached out to help steady the tray when it wobbled, the reflex of someone used to service. The server caught it just in time, whispering a thank you, and Clara realized too late that several nearby guests had noticed. A man nearby chuckled under his breath. "Old habits die hard," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Heat rushed to Clara's face. She withdrew her hand, her chest tightening. For a split second, she considered excusing herself to the restroom just to breathe, just to disappear. But then she remembered the envelope Julian had placed on the counter that morning. Thick, real, life-changing. She remembered why she said yes. Julian returned moments later, his expression unreadable, but his eyes flicked briefly to the man who had spoken. He did not say anything. Instead, he offered Clara his arm again, guiding her toward the center of the room where the crowd was gathering. The host was announcing the next portion of the evening, a series of acknowledgments and short speeches. Clara's pulse quickened. This was not part of the agreement. She had assumed she would stand quietly at the edge, not be pulled closer to the spotlight. As applause rose around them, she felt the weight of the room shift, attention sharpening, and for the first time that night, Clara sensed that something was about to happen. Something she could not clean up, something that might force her to choose between staying invisible and standing as herself. The applause softened into a polite hush as the host took the stage, his voice smooth and practiced, thanking sponsors and welcoming honored guests, and Clara felt the room tighten around her like a held breath. Julian leaned slightly closer, his hand firm at her elbow, guiding her forward just enough that they were no longer hidden by the crowd, and she realized with a jolt that they were standing where people could see her clearly now. Her heart pounded so hard she was certain the microphones would pick it up. She told herself to keep smiling, to stay quiet, to remember the rules of the agreement. But the sense of being examined, weighed, and judged pressed down on her shoulders. The host gestured toward Julian, praising his generosity, his influence, his leadership, and the applause swelled again, louder this time. Clara clapped along, a half-second late, her palms warm and damp. As the noise faded, a woman near the front turned and whispered something to her companion, glancing openly at Clara as if she were part of the decor, and the man laughed, shaking his head. Clara felt the old familiar urge to apologize for existing, for taking up space she had not earned. She shifted her weight, the hem of her borrowed dress, brushing against her ankles, and thought about the countless times she had scrubbed floors on her knees while people walked past without noticing. At least then, invisibility had been a kind of safety. The host continued, announcing a brief segment inviting guests to share why they supported the cause, and one by one, well-dressed donors stepped forward, speaking confidently about impact, about legacy, about giving back. The words sounded polished, rehearsed, floating above reality. Clara listened, her mind drifting despite herself to the donation boxes she had seen at grocery stores, to the way she dropped spare change in when she could, even when she could not afford it, because she knew what it felt like to need help and not ask. Julian was invited to say a few words. He nodded, stepping forward without hesitation, his posture straight, his voice calm and authoritative as he spoke about responsibility and opportunity. Clara watched him, noticing the small pause he took before mentioning the people who worked for him, the ones behind the scenes. He did not look at her, but something in his tone shifted, softened, just for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, the host smiled and turned toward Clara. And of course, we would love to hear from Julian's guest this evening. The words hit her like cold water. A few chuckles rippled through the room, surprised, curious. Clara's mouth went dry. This was not supposed to happen. Her instinct screamed to shake her head, to hide, to disappear behind Julian's shoulder. But she felt his hand tense slightly at her back. Not pushing, not pulling, simply there. The room waited. Hundreds of eyes settled on her. Some kind, many indifferent. A few sharp with expectation of entertainment. Clara thought of the agreement again, of the instruction to say very little to avoid attention. But she also thought of the comment earlier, the laughter, the way people had looked through her. Something inside her shifted, small but firm, like a muscle she had never used before. She stepped forward. The microphone felt heavier than she expected, cool against her fingers. For a second, she said nothing, and the silence stretched, uncomfortable and electric. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Then she spoke, her voice quiet at first, but steady. "I am not used to rooms like this," she said, and a few smiles flickered, indulgent. "I spend most of my days cleaning them after everyone has gone home." The smiles faltered. Clara swallowed and continued, words coming more easily now, fueled by honesty rather than courage. "I see what gets left behind. Not just messes, but reminders of how lucky some of us are. I am here because someone offered me money to be here, yes." A murmur moved through the crowd. "But I stayed because this cause matters, even to people who do not usually get invited." Her hands trembled slightly, but she did not stop. Giving is not about how it looks. It is about who it reaches. And sometimes, the people who understand that best are the ones who clean up after the party. The room went still. No laughter. No whispers. Just silence, thick and stunned. As Clara lowered the microphone, unaware that in that moment, she had done something no amount of money could ever buy. The silence did not break all at once. It fractured slowly, like ice under careful pressure, a breath here, a chair shifting there, a ripple of movement as people processed what had just been said. Clara stood very still, the microphone lowered, her hands finally steady, surprised by the calm settling in her chest. She had expected embarrassment, maybe regret, but instead there was a strange clarity, as if she had finally placed something heavy down. The host blinked, then recovered with a polite smile, thanking her and inviting applause, and this time the clapping came hesitant at first, then fuller, stronger, not thunderous but sincere. Clara stepped back beside Julian, her knees soft, aware of him in a way she had not been before. He did not speak. His gaze remained forward, but his posture had changed, less guarded, as though a seam in his armor had loosened. People began to approach them, conversations resuming with a different energy. A woman who had smirked earlier now nodded at Clara, uncertain but respectful. A man extended a hand and thanked her for her honesty. Clara accepted the gestures quietly, answering simply, the way she always did, but something had shifted in the air around her. She was no longer invisible. Julian was asked questions about the speech, about the message, about the cause, and for the first time he did not rush to reclaim the spotlight. He let the moment breathe. When the crowd thinned, he guided Clara away from the center toward a quieter corridor lined with tall windows overlooking the city. The lights below looked smaller from here, less intimidating, like a map rather than a maze. Julian turned to her, studying her face as if seeing it clearly for the first time. "You were not supposed to do that," he said, not unkindly. Clara nodded, the truth of it plain. "I know." There was a pause, the kind that used to make her apologize quickly. But she did not this time. "I am sorry if it caused you trouble," she added, because it mattered to say, not because she felt ashamed. Julian exhaled slowly. "It did cause trouble," he admitted, then surprised them both by smiling, just a little. "But not the kind I am worried about." He glanced back toward the ballroom, where people still talked in small clusters, their faces thoughtful. "You said what most people here would never dare to say." Clara shrugged, a small, tired motion. "I only said what I know." He nodded, then reached into his jacket and handed her the envelope she had been trying not to think about all night. Clara took it, the weight familiar and strange at the same time. She looked at it, then back at him. "Thank you," she said, and meant it for more than the money. As they prepared to leave, a board member intercepted them, congratulating Julian on the evening, praising the authenticity of the moment, hinting that the speech might do more for the cause than any check. Julian listened, composed, but his eyes flicked briefly to Clara, acknowledging the truth without saying it. Outside, the cool night air hit Clara's skin, grounding her. The car waited at the curb, door open, the driver polite and silent. As they pulled away, the hotel shrinking behind them, Clara felt the adrenaline fade, replaced by a deep fatigue. She leaned back against the seat, staring out at the passing streets, thinking about tomorrow morning, about waking up early, about the penthouse floors that would still need to be cleaned. Part of her wondered if tonight would change anything at all. Julian broke the silence. "I do not want you to think of this as a one-night transaction," he said carefully. Clara turned to him, surprised. "I do not want to pretend nothing happened." She held his gaze steady. "Now, neither do I." The car moved through the city, carrying them away from the gala, from the chandeliers and applause, toward something quieter and more uncertain, where contracts began to feel smaller than choices and the line between being hired and being seen had finally been crossed. Morning arrived without ceremony, gray light slipping through the thin curtains of Clara's apartment as her alarm buzzed at 6:30 sharp. The same sound it had made every day for years, and for a moment she wondered if the gala had been a dream stitched together by exhaustion. Her body ached in familiar places as she sat up, the weight of the borrowed night settling back into reality. The envelope lay on her small kitchen table where she had placed it the night before, unopened, untouched, as if looking at it too closely might break something fragile inside her. She dressed quietly, pulling on her usual jeans and sneakers, tying her hair back with practiced efficiency, and made herself a cup of weak coffee while the city woke up around her. On her phone, notifications stacked quickly, messages from coworkers who had seen clips online, headlines already forming their own versions of what had happened. Housekeeper speaks truth at elite gala. Unexpected speech stuns donors. Clara did not click them. She did not trust herself to see her words filtered through strangers. At 8 o'clock, she was back at the penthouse, keys jangling softly as she let herself in. The space pristine and silent, exactly as she had left it. She set her bag down and stood there for a moment, absorbing the familiarity, the quiet hum of appliances, the faint scent of lemon cleaner. Felt grounding. She began her work, vacuuming, dusting, moving through the rooms on autopilot, until the elevator chimed and Julian stepped out, earlier than usual. He looked different, less polished, tie absent, sleeves rolled. Clara froze, then straightened instinctively. "Good morning," she said. Julian nodded. "Good morning." There was a brief pause, thick with things unsaid. "I wanted to check in," he continued. "There has been a reaction." Clara did not stop moving, wiping down the counter with slow precision. "I assumed there would be. Some of it is not positive," he said carefully. "A few board members are concerned. They think last night shifted focus away from the donors." Clara nodded once. "I understand. I did not intend to cause problems." Julian watched her, the way she worked, efficient, contained. "You did not cause them," he said. "You revealed them." The words landed quietly between them. He told her about the calls that morning, the mixed responses, the praise and the discomfort, how some people admired the honesty while others questioned judgment. Clara listened without interrupting, her hands steady, her breathing even. When he finished, she turned to face him. "If you want to end this," she said, "meaning more than the cleaning job, I understand. I can finish today and leave quietly." She reached for the envelope, finally, lifting it from the table and holding it out to him. Julian stared at it, then at her. "I did not ask for that," he said. "You paid me for a role I did not play," Clara replied softly. "I came as myself." Julian took a breath, then surprised her by pushing the envelope back toward her. "You earned it," he said. "Not because you followed instructions, but because you did not." Clara felt a tightness in her throat she did not expect. Later that day, as she rode the bus home, she noticed people more than usual. The tired eyes, the worn shoes, the small acts of kindness exchanged without acknowledgement. She wondered how many stories went unheard every day because the people living them believed they did not belong on a stage. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Julian. "Would you be willing to meet later? Not as your employer, as someone who wants to listen." Clara stared at the screen, the city passing in a blur outside the window. She thought about the choices she had made, about standing under bright lights and speaking anyway, about the line she had crossed and could not uncross. She typed a simple reply, "Yes." And for the first time since the gala, she smiled, not because she felt brave or important, but because she finally felt honest. They met that evening at a small diner a few blocks from the river, the kind of place with vinyl booths and a bell above the door that rang every time someone walked in. A place Clara had eaten at 100 times without ever thinking it mattered. Julian arrived first and chose a booth by the window, his jacket folded beside him, looking oddly out of place without the gloss of penthouses and galas. When Clara walked in, he stood, not out of habit or performance, but because he wanted to, and she noticed the difference immediately. They ordered coffee and spoke at first about simple things, the weather, the traffic, the way the city felt quieter after 9, easing into the space between them like people learning a new language. Then Julian told her what the day had brought. A senior board member had called an emergency meeting, questioning optics and control, suggesting that the gala had set a precedent they could not manage, that donors expected polish, not disruption. Clara listened, hands wrapped around her mug, the heat steadying her. She did not interrupt, did not apologize. When he finished, she asked one question. "What do you want?" Julian did not answer right away. He stared out the window, watching a bus sigh to a stop, passengers stepping down with tired faces and backpacks slung low. "I built everything by managing outcomes," he said finally. "By making sure nothing surprised me. Last night surprised me." He turned back to her. "It made me realize how little I hear when I am always the one speaking." Clara considered this the way she considered every choice that carried weight. "I am not looking for a different job," she said carefully. "And I am not interested in being a symbol." Julian nodded. "I am not offering either. What I am offering is space. To tell the truth without dressing it up. To help me fix what is broken without pretending it is not." He slid a folded paper across the table. It was not a contract. It was a simple outline, handwritten, proposing a listening council made up of staff across his companies, paid time, real authority, real follow-through. Clara read it slowly. "This would upset people," she said. "It already has," he replied. She met his eyes. "And me?" He smiled, not defensive, not charming, just honest. "Especially you." Silence settled between them, not heavy, not urgent. Clara thought about her mother at the kitchen table, counting pills into a plastic organizer, about coworkers who never complained because complaining did not pay rent, about how easy it would be to step back into the familiar quiet of cleaning and leave this discomfort to someone else. She pushed the paper back to him. "I will help," she said, "but not if you need me to soften it." He shook his head. "I need you to keep it sharp." They finished their coffee and stood, the decision not grand, not cinematic, just real. Outside, the night air felt cooler, clearer. As they parted, Julian hesitated. There is something else, he said. The board wants me to make a statement distancing myself from what you said. Clara nodded. And will you? He did not answer with words. He took out his phone and showed her a draft message he had already written. Owning the moment, backing the message, inviting accountability. Clara exhaled, the tension she had been holding loosening at last. Whatever came next would not be easy, but it would be honest. And for the first time that felt like enough. The fallout did not wait politely for morning. It arrived in sharp emails and urgent calls, in headlines that framed the story as controversy rather than truth, and in a calendar invite marked mandatory that pulled Julian into a glass-walled boardroom before the city had finished waking up. Clara learned about it later, piecing together fragments as the day unfolded, the way she always pieced together other people's messes after they had moved on. By noon, Julian stood in her apartment doorway, not as her employer and not as a guest, but as someone carrying weight he could not set down alone. They sat at her small kitchen table, knees nearly touching, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the quiet. The board had drawn a line, he said. Issue a statement distancing the company from the message or risk losing key partners and control. The words landed heavy. Clara listened without interruption, her hands folded, her face calm in a way that surprised even her. When he finished, she stood and crossed the room, retrieving the envelope from a drawer where she had placed it days earlier. She set it between them. This is where I step back, she said gently. Julian frowned. This is not about money. It is about consequences, she replied. You chose to listen. Now they are asking you to choose comfort. She pushed the envelope closer. I will not be the reason you lose everything you built. He reached for it and stopped, his hand hovering. If I do this, he said quietly, I keep the company intact. I keep leverage. I can still help in other ways. Clara shook her head. Not like this. Not if the first thing that breaks is honesty. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. Julian stood abruptly, pacing once, then stopping. I am not asking you to disappear, he said. I am asking for time. Clara met his eyes, steady. Time is what people with safety ask for when people without it are told to wait. The words were not sharp, but they cut all the same. He closed his eyes, then nodded, understanding dawning even as it hurt. I will not put this on you, he said. Then do not, Clara replied, sliding the envelope back toward him. He did not take it. Instead, he left, the door clicking softly behind him, and Clara sat alone with the sound, feeling the ache of choosing what was right over what was easy. That night, she returned to work at a different building, mopping floors under fluorescent lights, the rhythm familiar, grounding. She did not check her phone. She did not wait for apologies. She focused on the simple truth she had learned under chandeliers and scrutiny alike. Speaking up had changed things, but it did not guarantee comfort. And for the first time, she accepted that consequence was not failure. It was proof. The choice became public before either of them spoke again. The following afternoon, Julian stood alone at the podium of a press briefing meant to calm investors. The city skyline muted behind him, and instead of reading the prepared statement his advisors had polished, he folded the paper and set it aside. He spoke plainly, owning the moment at the gala, affirming the message rather than distancing from it, acknowledging that the truth had come from someone whose labor built the quiet order others enjoyed. He announced the listening council, outlined its authority, and accepted the cost that would follow. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some partners withdrew. A few executives resigned. Donations paused, then trickled back, slower but steadier, accompanied by letters that thanked him for choosing integrity over comfort. Clara learned of it at the end of her shift, the news playing softly on a break room television as she rinsed her hands, the words unmistakable even at low volume. She did not smile. She did not feel triumphant. She felt seen. That evening, Julian came to her building again, not to ask and not to persuade, but to stand in the doorway and say simply, I chose. Clara studied his face, the lines deeper now, the ease gone, replaced by resolve. She nodded once. Then we are clear, she said. They sat, not close, not distant, and spoke about next steps without romance or promises, about boundaries and accountability, about how trust would be built slowly or not at all. Julian asked if she would serve on the council. Clara agreed on one condition, that her voice would not be used as cover for decisions she did not help make. He accepted without negotiation. When he left, the city hummed on, unchanged in its noise, altered in its direction by inches rather than miles. Clara stood at her window, looking down at the streetlights, understanding that the night of chandeliers had not ended with applause or confession, but with a decision carried forward into daylight. It was not a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. 6 months later, the penthouse no longer felt like a monument to silence but a place in motion, quieter in its confidence and louder in its listening. And Clara noticed the difference every time she walked through the doors. She still cleaned, still moved with care, but now she also sat at tables where decisions were made, where schedules changed to protect bodies, where pay scales were spoken aloud instead of whispered about in hallways. The listening council met twice a month, and when Clara spoke, people wrote things down. Not because she was perfect or polished, but because she was precise. Julian attended every meeting, never at the head of the table, never shielding himself with titles. He learned when to speak and when to wait. Some days were hard. Some days felt like setbacks dressed up as progress. But the work continued. One evening, after a long session that ended with laughter instead of exhaustion, Julian walked Clara to the bus stop, the city warm and ordinary around them. He did not offer rides anymore unless she asked. He did not assume. They stood side by side, watching headlights blur past, and he held out a small envelope, thinner than the first. Clara raised an eyebrow. "It is not money," he said. She opened it and found the gala invitation, the same hotel, the same night of the year, only this time her name was printed without qualifiers. No guest, no role, just Clara Bennett. She looked up. "I am not going for a speech," she said. "I know," he replied. She smiled, the kind that did not ask permission. At the gala, Clara wore a dress she chose herself, simple and unborrowed, and when the host welcomed the room, he thanked the people whose work made generosity possible, naming cleaners and cooks and drivers alongside donors. Applause rose without confusion this time. Later, as the night softened, Julian found Clara near the windows overlooking the city. He did not kneel. He did not grandstand. He simply said, "I want to keep choosing the harder truth with you, if you are willing." Clara considered him, the room, the path that had brought them there. She reached into her bag and pulled out the first envelope, now empty, and tore it cleanly in half. "I am not for sale," she said gently. "I know," he answered. "Then stay," she said, "not as a deal, not as a favor, but as a commitment to keep listening." He nodded. The city glittered below them, unchanged and newly possible, and for the first time, the story did not end with money or shock, but with dignity, shared work, and a future chosen out loud.